Hey, thank you for visiting my channel, Medical Assistant with Miss K. If this is your first time visiting, welcome. My name is Kendra, also known as Miss K. I'm a medical assistant instructor. I teach both clinical and administrative medical assistant courses. And today I'm going to be talking about how to become a medical assistant instructor. And I'm going to be sharing some, some of the benefits and even some cons of being a medical assistant instructor for those of you that are interested. I know the majority of my subscribers here are brand new medical assistants. Many of you are just about to finish school or just finished school, but I do have many of you who have emailed me or commented that you've been a medical assistant for like 5, 10, 12, 15 years. And so for anybody that's interested in teaching, I wanted to make sure I put this video up so that way I can kind of let you know, give you some ideas about it and see if this is right for you. Maybe you never thought about it, and maybe this video, you've been in the field for years, and maybe this video will spark your interest in teaching. So I'm going to first share a little bit of my story and then what you can do to become a medical assistant instructor as well. So I became a medical assistant in 2004, December 2004, January 2005. I always say both because that's when I finished my externship and I got hired. And the reason why I say both is because I technically finished my hours January 2004. And they hired me, and I was thinking that I was still doing my externship, but I was done my hours and I had got hired. And so I think officially it ended up being January 2005. I can't remember, but either way, I've been a medical assistant for over 17 years now. But I got hired on my externship. It was GYN, and I worked there for a year. And then I ended up working, I worked there for about a year, and then I ended up going to another job that I ended up staying for 4 years. And so I've worked in several different practices. And then in 2011, I got an opportunity to become an instructor. And mind you, I was very young. I was 25 at the time. And I got the opportunity to become an instructor. And I remember when I was in school for medical assistant, I remember my instructor being very young. She was like, I was 18 when I went to school for medical assistant, and I remember my instructor, well, the co-instructor, she was like 19 or 20. She had just finished school and they allowed her to become a co-instructor. So I remember having a very young teacher. So I knew that I could do it. I knew that I could be 25 and be a medical assistant instructor. I knew it was possible, but I was very nervous. Most of the students, they were older than me. Many of them were old enough to be my mother. I mean, there were students that was my age and younger too, but a lot of them was old enough to be my mother. So it was just so weird. I didn't know what I wanted them to call me. And it was my very first class that I got that actually gave me the name Miss K, because it felt weird for them to call me by my last name. It felt weird to be called Miss period. But I remember this one student, I'll never forget. She was like, you know what? I'm gonna call you Miss K. I never forget. She said, she used to be like, Miss K, Miss K. I'm gonna call you Miss K. I never will forget that. So Miss K just stuck. And so all my students, they call me Miss K, hence the channel name, Medical Assistant with Miss K. And so I eventually got used to teaching. Like I said, I was very, very young. I was 25, and I was there for a couple years. And then I was there from 2011 to 2013, and I ended up going into cardiology that year. And then I was there to 2017 until I started teaching again. So, and I worked at a couple offices while I was teaching. So I've been fortunate enough to be able to kind of go back and forth. And so, I have taught at 3 different schools now. And the school that I work at now, I was once working another school at the same time, and I ended up deciding to just stick with this one school that I'm at now. And so I love it. And so that's why I wanted to do this video, because I wanted to, kind of talk about how you can do the same thing. What are the benefits, even some of the cons, right? So the very first requirement for becoming a medical instructor is that you have to have experience. Now, how much experience depends on the school. Some schools may require you have at least 3 years of experience in the field. Some may be 5. But you definitely have to be a medical assistant. And some schools even prefer and even require that you have an associate's degree. Now, that the associate's degree can be a medical assistant, because medical assistant is offered as an associate's program as well. Or it could be an associate's, at least an associate's degree in some other healthcare profession. You do still have to have that medical assistant diploma, but then some also want you to have, in addition to that, some kind of degree. So it kind of depends on the school. So what I recommend doing, if you are interested in it, I would recommend calling medical assistant schools in your area and calling to find out what their requirements are. Another thing you need to do is get certified. So many of you are probably already certified. If you get certified, just make sure you keep up with your CEUs and keep your certification active, because as I mentioned, I became a medical assistant at 19 and I was very immature, very irresponsible. I didn't keep up with my certification. And so I was not certified for a long time. I got certified when I finished school. And then I was only certified for 2 years and I let it expire. And because I always held a job, and each job, they just, they recognized my experience and I didn't need to be certified again. I never got certified again until like in 2017, when the school that I was working at required it. They required us to be certified. So I had to get it. But other than that, I was working constantly and never needed it. And many of you have that same issue, because I have had many of you say the same thing. You got certified, didn't keep up with it, but you have a lot of experience. And so if you want to be a medical assistant instructor, go get the certification. Some schools will require it anyway before they would even consider you. And some may, let you work and then give you time to get certified, like the school that I was at. And if you've been working in the field, the information will come back to you. You will have to probably get brushed up on some things because you haven't seen it in a while. And so that's what I did. I was teaching anyway. So some of the things I was, used to, and I was, I knew, but then there were some other things that I had to go back and get brushed up in. And that's fine. Other thing is that you want to be on point with your hands-on clinicals, right? So the book work that you're going to have to teach, a lot of that stuff you've forgotten over the years, which is fine, because you'll get a textbook and things like that, and you'll be able to get brushed up. Like I mentioned, for the certification, you'll have to get brushed up, because if you haven't seen it in a while, you forget it, depending on what specialty you're in. Like I was in GYN for a while, and so stuff like that, it was a no-brainer for me. But then other things that I hadn't seen in a while, like I remember suture removal was one. There were some other things that I had to get another instructor to remind me how to do, because I hadn't seen it since I was in school. And so that's understandable. So there's going to be some things that you will have to get brushed up on, but for the most part, you want to make sure your hands-on is on point. Like your blood pressures, your vital signs, period, drawing blood, giving injection and things like that, right? And like I said, you'll be able to get brushed up, but you want to be comfortable yourself with that, because you don't want to become an instructor and then you're in there with students and then you're shaky and don't know what you're doing either, right? We can't be having a blind leading the blind. Another thing I would say is that you're going to have some type of passion and love for teaching and helping people, because you're going to have a lot of patience, because you're going to be working with a lot of people who are brand new to the medical field. I've had students who were working in the government for 20 years and decided to become a medical assistant. No type of clinical medical experience, no type of hands-on. I mean, people who literally shaking the first time they get a needle in their hand. And so you have to really be patient, and you have to have a passion for this, because you're going to have, like I said, brand new to the field. You're going to have some students who are going to be difficult, just like we have difficult patients. And so that same passion that we should have as a medical assistant for our patients is the same passion and love and patience that you're going to have for your students as well. So if you know that you are easily irritated, if you know that you are impatient, I don't know, you might want to, think about it a little bit more. Ask yourself if this is something you really want to do, because you really want to have some type of love and passion for teaching. I had a business before I became a medical assistant instructor, where I would go out to people's houses and sell my products, and I was teaching women about their bodies. And so because of that, I really believe that was what, I know that that's what equipped me to be a medical assistant, because I'm naturally a shy person. People don't believe it because I do videos and I speak in front of people and I teach and stuff like that, but I'm actually a naturally shy person. And so I would never have been able to get up in front of a class and teach if it wasn't for the business that I had for about a year or so before I started teaching. So like I said, you want to have some type of passion and love for what you're doing. And this takes me to the benefits, because one of the benefits is that that you're making you're making a difference in the lives of your students. Like, I can't tell you how many students I've had come to me and say, Miss K, you're like a big sister, you're like a mother figure, like, you really made me look at things differently. Like, you inspire me so much. So many students had told me that, and just to know that I made a difference in somebody's life, that's probably like the biggest benefit of all, because, as a medical assistant, I've always been very professional, and I'm very big on professionalism and, giving quality care. And so it's very important for me to teach that to my students, and to, to put other medical assistants out there that have that same mindset of quality patient care, right? And because when you go to the doctor, you want to feel like you're being cared for and loved, right? And so I always teach my students to make sure you're giving your patients that same experience, whether you work in a front desk or you're back there with the patient, right? And so that's like the biggest benefit. Another benefit is, just depending on what you teach, you kind of become an expert in certain subjects, because you teach it, you have to know it. And so things that you probably haven't seen since you were in school and now you got to teach it, you just become an expert in that in your everyday life, really. The downside is that when you teach the same thing for too long, you kind of forget everything else. Like for a long time, I was just the phlebotomy instructor. I don't know how I became the phlebotomy instructor, and I didn't teach anything else for some reason. And then when I got moved to the pharmacology mod, I had to get brushed up in that, right? And then terminology, I had to teach terminology. I had to get brushed up in terminology, and because I hadn't seen it in a while. And so that's kind of the downside of teaching the same thing over and over, is that, like I said, the benefit is that you know it, you're an expert at it, but then the downside is that you kind of forget everything else. Another benefit that you probably already know is that the pay as an instructor will be better than what you make in a doctor's office. Now, of course, this is always going to depend on where you live, the school you work at, and things like that, your experience and stuff like that. But for the most part, as an instructor, you will make more than you make as a medical assistant working in the office. Now, I think I mentioned that I was working at 2 schools at one point at the same time. And one of the schools, my morning school, was paying me a certain number, which was higher than any other dollar salary I've ever gotten as an MA. But then the evening school I was working at paid me double that, okay? So believe me when I say that you can make a lot of money as a medical assistant instructor. So just take that, whatever that number was that I was making in the morning, which I'm not going to say, my evening school, which was already a good number, my evening school paid me literally double that an hour. So just think about it like that. But you can make some really good money as a medical assistant instructor. The downside, though, is that many of the medical assistant instructor positions are part-time. So many of my co-workers, they work other jobs. Like me, like I said, I was working 2 jobs at one point. And so it depends on the school. Like some schools, they only have a certain amount of full-time jobs. So you may only see like a few full-time medical assistant instructors. Everybody else is part-time and work another job. Or maybe that's all they do, right? Just work that one part-time job. But that's kind of the downside to it. And I know it depends on where you are, what state you're in, how things work, because I'm in a DC area, and every school that I've worked at have been like that. So, I can imagine that there's probably in other places, it's probably different. But for the most part, you may not work full time, so you may not qualify for the benefits and stuff like that you may have at your full-time medical assistant job. So that's definitely something to look at. And definitely when you call around to these medical assistant schools, that's definitely something that you want to find out. Do they have part-time hours or full-time hours, or both? Another thing you want to be mindful of is the fact that your work will often come home with you. And when I say often, I mean more often than not. Your work will come home with you unless your school has administrative hours for you. Now, every school that I've worked at had administrative hours where you have your set class. I should say your class is from 9 to 1 or whatever, 9 to whatever. And then you'll have 2 hours that's just administrative hours where they're non-teaching hours. You're catching up and grading papers, creating assignments, making phone calls or whatever. So if you have those hours, those administrative hours, or even an administrative day built into your schedule, then that will be good, because then you can do most of that at work and not bring it home. But for the most part, a lot of your stuff is going to come home with you, because you'll have the task of creating assignments, and your school will probably have some assignments for you already created. And so again, all of this is going to depend on the school that you work in, because some schools, they'll have assignments already pre-made. Then there's going to be some schools that they will literally give you the syllabus, maybe an outline, maybe not. Maybe you have to create your own outline, because my first school, we had to create our own outline. And then the school that I'm at currently, they give us an outline. So if you work at a school where they just give you a syllabus and they pretty much tell you, this is your class, you can teach it how you want. As long as the students learn every single outcome on the syllabus, we don't care how you teach it, then you will be tasked with creating assignments and tests and things like that. And so stuff like that takes time. I always do the hard work in the beginning when I have to create my own stuff, because I would rather do all of that in the beginning of the class and then it'll flow. And then if I teach the same class the next semester or the next module, I'll just keep recycling the same thing, using the same thing. And then if I end up teaching another class, I got to do it all over. But you know, it works. Once you start teaching and you get yourself a system and you know, you get organized. That's one of the things I will say too. You definitely want to get organized. I am generally not an organized person, really. But when it comes to teaching, for some reason, I'm just like a different kind of person. All of my stuff is organized. My instructor, my co-instructor, I remember her telling me, "You are so efficient." And that was surprising because I've always saw myself as unorganized. But then I realized what she meant, because I'm very organized when it comes to how I organize my classroom and my papers and stuff. I use notebooks and stuff. I do recommend using a binder with different assignments and handouts and things like that. And so you definitely want to have some type of organization. And I can actually do a separate video on that. Let me know if you're watching this video and you're a medical assistant instructor or thinking about becoming one, and you want me to give some more ideas of how to get more organized with your classroom. Let me know. I'll do a video on that, because that thought just popped up in my mind. But you definitely want to be organized. And another thing I would say, you know, you may, depending on how your school is set up, find yourself wearing multiple hats. I have been instructor, I have been counselor, I have been mom, I have been big sister, I have been the registrar, you know, logging attendance. And so depending on how your school is set up, you may have to wear multiple hats. And what I mean by that is that you may be responsible for teaching. You may also be responsible for logging attendance. If your students don't show up, you have to call and log it. And so it's just be mindful that you may find yourself doing multiple things, right? And then in the classroom, students are going to have problems. And if you're an empath, you may take some of that stuff home with you. You got to be able to leave that stuff at the door. Just like with your patients, you got to be able to leave that stuff at the door when it comes to your students as well, right? And so you may wear those multiple hats, but you just got to remember that you can't help everybody, right? When it comes to being counselor and mom and all that stuff, you can't help everybody, right? And as far as whether you have to do attendance and logs and things like that, that's going to depend on where you work, because I've worked at schools where we had to do all of that, right? On top of teaching, we had to call students, make notes and all of that, right? Log their attendance and things like that. But where I work now, they simply want us to teach. They have somebody for all of that. They just want us to teach. They want us to focus on teaching the students. So it depends on where you work. Now, I'm going to have to probably do a part 2 to this, because there are some things I know I'm leaving off. And, you know, I don't want this video to be too long. So I'm probably going to end up doing a part 2. Let me know down below if I should do a part 2, if there's anything I left off. If you're a medical assistant instructor, let me know if I left anything else off as far as requirements, benefits and cons. I can do, you know, there's so much more. But like I said, I don't want this video to be too long. So if this was helpful, let me know down below. If you haven't subscribed already, do so if you'd like to see more content from me. If you have a question or comment or video suggestion, feel free to leave it down below, or you can email me. That'll be listed down below as well. Thank you again for visiting my channel. Be blessed.